of people don't know, and probably even fewer actually care, that I used to be a German professor. That's right. I was on the faculty at Michigan State teaching German and what was called applied linguistics, still is, which is foreign language education. And the only reason it matters is because at the same time I was in night school getting my MBA at the University of Michigan, which, yes, if you're keeping track, I was studying at Michigan State, or teaching at Michigan State while studying at the University of Michigan. Longer story. But what's interesting to me is the transition then from that teaching position to CEB happened quite literally overnight. So I went from, teaching the dative case in the German language to teaching chief sales officers how to run their key account program literally in a matter of days. And I will tell you, if there's such a thing as imposter syndrome, which I think we all know is true because we live and die by it every single day, there was never a time in my life where it was as strong as it was then. And I had to learn how to survive, right? So I'm on the phone all day long with chief sales officers who are asking me advice at the corporate executive board about how to run their sales organizations. And I didn't know. I mean, I had some ideas, but, but I couldn't just sort of make stuff up. That wasn't the business proposition of the company at the time. Still, it wasn't when I left. But what I found, though, is that while I didn't have deep expertise, what I did have is something so much more valuable, and I had it almost immediately. You know what I had? I had access. Because every time I talked to one of those heads of sales, first of all, the conversation would usually start with something like, at our company, we're totally different. And then it's like, yeah, okay. And then they proceed to tell me something I just heard from 3 other companies who had also told me that they were totally different. And over time, you begin to pattern recognize, right? You begin to see, they're all suffering from the same challenge. And every once in a while, you find someone's actually solved that challenge, or maybe at least a part of that challenge. And then you realize what you have here is access to all of these different perspectives from people who would value to know what each other's thinking, in fact, would desperately value it, but don't have that access themselves. Because if there's one thing your customers all want to know, is what are other companies like them doing? And so purely out of survival, what I learned to do is share that perspective, with taking out all proprietary information, of course, but it became a phrase. And it's a phrase now that sits at the heart and soul of the Framemaking sale, and we call it the phrase that frames. And the phrase goes something like this. In working with other companies like you, one of the things that we've been surprised to learn is, and then fill in the blank. And there's all sorts of different ways. It doesn't have to be those exact words verbatim, but really that phrase captures the spirit of frame making. Because what I'm really doing is I'm not showing up as an expert. In fact, we have data and research, and some of it you'll find in the article called Sense Making for Sales in Harvard Business Review, and we review it in the book as well, where if you show up as an expert, I've been doing this for 30 years, here's what you need to do, you actually do material damage to customer self-confidence because you're solving for their confidence in you. Trust me. But you're not solving for their confidence in themselves, which is what we're trying to solve for in the book and what matters most to drive commercial growth. And so what you find is that the thing that really solves for customer self-confidence is not what you think, but what other companies like them think. And lo and behold, you know that because you just talked to those other companies. Either you did individually or your company did collectively. And you can share that, again, stripping out proprietary information, of course, or anything you can't share, but to say in working with other customers like you, one of the things we've been surprised to learn is, now notice I'm posturing myself as a learner with you. We're learning together. And I'm surprised. I didn't know this either. It's kind of crazy. There's a humility in that. You don't always have to be surprised per se, but to present it with a certain level of humility, like, we didn't know this either, but we're kind of all going on this journey together. What I'm doing is I'm sitting with you. I'm stepping sort of across the table and sitting with you on your side of the table as a co-learner, as opposed to a seller. And what if we were to collaboratively go on this learning journey together and kind of just look out into the world and understand what other companies like them have done, either successfully or maybe less successfully, to get to a better place, or maybe such that we can provide them with advice and access to that experience. And this phrase becomes so powerful because it's based on something called social proof, which Robert Cialdini talks about at great length in his book Influence, which is this powerful idea of that if you want to help people feel better about themselves, or just have more influence people, help them see what other people like them have done or are doing. And so as you think about showing up to your customers with advice, rather than presenting it as expertise, which we all crave as their recognition of like, wow, this guy's really smart, right? I craved it too, still kind of do. It feels good, right? But nonetheless, what really is powerful is this very humble sort of positioning of, I'm just the messenger, but here's what we're seeing. Because that's ultimately what your customers are finding valuable. And working with other customers like you, one of the things that we've learned, or we've been surprised to learn, is X. That is a very different posture. That's not the posture of a seller. It's a posture of a co-learner. It's a posture of a collaborator. And ultimately, our data tells us while they may not want to talk to sales, they do want to talk to human beings who can provide that kind of information. So think about the phrase that frames and how you can frame your customers' thinking based on what you and your colleagues have seen elsewhere from companies like them.